Hey, welcome. This is The Process. My name is Dr. John Bush. This is lesson 125. We're going through the wide receiver deep metrics. I finished with quarterback, RB, tight end. Now we're going to the wide receivers. And let's get started. So, first slide here. This just shows the population of wide receivers from 2000 to 2021 versus years of experience. Uh, I do this, and I did this for the other three positions just so we have an idea of kind of the survivorship that is happens to wide receivers, and you can see we start around 850 year one, and by year five we've gone by half, and by year eight we've gone to a fourth. So there is an attrition that occurs, and the survivors in this kind of process will be, obviously the ones that can score and have value. And so for Dynasty, just in the back of your mind, realize that there is a shrinking pool as one is drafted, and in 4 years, half of those are gone, and in 8 years, 3/4 are gone. So it is good to kind of refresh your wide receivers, but you should realize that that's this natural trend that's occurring. So just kind of keep that, and you see when you get to 12 years out, it is an extreme. Very few are left, maybe 50 out of the original 850. So it's only the best of the best are lasting, 12 years. And of course, you can get more extremes out from there. Let's see. Okay. So, as I've done previously, looking at the 21 years, I like to carve out sectors and look at blocks of wide receivers in this case, and use metrics I'm measuring part ways just to kind of see what the recency of trends are, and do I need to kind of keep that in the back of my mind here, because as things change, you do need to be aware of that. And so the first column is wide receiver average of fantasy points. And it is very clear that we, in the last 3 years, were at 76.5, and in 2000 to 2005, it was 90.5. So we're talking 14 points drop in the average fantasy points. I believe a lot of that is probably teams are using more wide receivers, and there's more wide receivers there. There becomes specialties and certain, like, two receiver sets, three, four, etc. So there's a lot more specialization that's occurring, and I believe then that there are niche roles for wide receivers, just as there are for, and we've seen for running backs as well. We've seen kind of a same phenomenon there. The average of number of rushes is actually, it's kind of come up. It was 1.6, and now in the last 3 years it's 1.5, but it kind of did a kind of a bowl shaped pattern there, which is kind of interesting. And again, this is looking at all wide receivers, okay? All wide receivers, okay? Not just the top. And then the average reception yards, we have declined. And again, I think there's a specialty going on, and there's probably more wide receivers in the last 3 years than were in the league in the first 5. And so that's going to be uh, a change here in some of these metrics. So you got to kind of think about the basis for these metrics here. And this is just looking at the fantasy point drop. I plotted that out just for us to take a look at it and see, just kind of visualize the actual yearly sectors and what the metrics have been. And again, I think more wide receivers, and that's giving us a lower average of fantasy. So here is the rushing in the bars, blue bars with yellow lines. I thought that was pretty. And then the reception yards in red squares. And you can see that the pattern has dropped and has come back in the last 3 years, which is kind of interesting. So I think that what we've seen in somebody like Deebo Samuel is the case that a lot more wide receivers are actually coming on board on rushing than in a long time. And I believe, that adds a luster and bonus to any wide receivers that can be used as rushers. So that may be a trend that's going to continue. It's going to be very interesting to get that rare sub niche of wide receiver that actually can provide us rushing points as well. And reception yards have dropped since the 2000 here. You can see the red circles, and we're at the lowest we've been. But I believe that downward trend is due to the loss of, to more wide receivers coming into the league and being used in specialty kind of situations here. I believe we can say that. So to delve deeper into the metrics that we just talked about, I had the year sectors that we continued to look at, and then I broke that down. So I carved the pie even more into what I call rank, into the season rank sectors from the top 25%, that's 100 to 75. The next 25%, which is 74 to 50, and then the two slices of the pie, if you think of it as a pie, below average, so below the 50 percentile here. And so now we could look at the metrics of average fantasy points, rushing, and reception yards, so we can actually then probably focus on the best wide receivers. That's the 100 to 75. And if you look at that, in 2000 to 05, it was 213, 199, 204, and 198. And I've dropped the arrow there just to show it has declined, but probably not as much as, one might think there in the top. But we do see a decline in the production there a little bit. We're talking, about 5-6% a drop here. So it's nothing that we should adjust anything, but I do like to keep track of that. Rushing has come back and is actually the highest it's ever been in the top wide receivers there. 3.5 versus 2.9. So where, that's not a lot of rushes, uh, you know, on average. It's still somewhat higher than it has been. So I believe that may be pointing either by chance we're getting more wide receivers uh, that can rush, and so it's definitely something to pay attention to, and that trend has gone up. Looking in the top 25% in reception yards, we're talking almost 1,996, and now we're at 901. So again, I think there's more wide receivers, and that is part of that. But that's dropped almost 10% over the 21 years. But again, I believe the numbers of wide receivers have declined as well. The looking at this, but converting then the top metrics in each category and putting that at 100%, and then comparing each little sliver to that 100 percentile, we can get a sense of where we're actually at in the last 3 years. So 2000 to 2005, as far as average fantasy points for wide receivers, that was the 100% mark. There hasn't been anything higher. And we're talking it declined to 94%, 96, and we're at 93. So we dropped 7% in the 21 years. And rushing, we've gone from 82 to 99%. So we've increased by 20%, roughly 17%. So that's interesting. And then the reception yards have dropped by 10%. So it's good to realize that over time there is this specialization. There's more wide receivers that are being used, and I think that's affecting then the what you can expect from wide receivers. So your expectation is something we need to keep in mind, and we're going to watch in the next 10 years or so. Is this going to go down even further? In other words, are we going to get even more specialization, even more niche type players? It's going to be very interesting to see if that is the case for the league. Here is just the bar graphs of these percentiles, and we're looking at the green is the average fantasy, the red is the rushing, and the yellow is reception yards. And I do note that just kind of what we've seen, that the last 3 years here from 19 to 2021, rushing has definitely increased if you look at the red line in that. And the average fantasy points has declined as well a little bit, and then the reception yards has declined. So that's kind of the same story, just another way to look at it. And I'm a big believer that the visual will allow you to remember the metrics more than just a table with numbers in it. So I do like to have tabular data, but I do like to have visual data as well. So just for you to look and see what we've got, if you look at the kind of the next wide receivers, we really haven't talked about that sliver from 50 percentile to 74. Nothing's really changed. I think there's been some declines in rushing, reception yards, and fantasy points a little bit. Maybe not as dramatic as the top sliver the top 25%, but that has been overall decline as well. And finally, the last, final slide here. I'm breaking the two sectors above average, the 74 to 50th and the 100 to 75th. And we want to compare the percent of the differences between the average fantasy points of the those two sectors, and just to see, is there a little bit of difference in those, and really not seeing a lot of differences if you compare. So nothing's really changed a lot in 21 years as far as the differences, except for rushing. Rushing has changed dramatically in the last 3 years compared to the previous. Okay, so we definitely have seen a difference, and which is very interesting. And but as far as the reception yards, no big difference as well. So I think the take home is we've probably seen a decline in some of the metrics because of the specialization of wide receivers. There's more wide receivers getting at least an opportunity or two than previous. There's different wide receivers for certain sets, 3 wide receiver sets, 2 wide receivers, 4, etc. So extreme situations. So I think that specialization is going to continue. So that will take away a little bit from what the wide receivers will bring us. And if we see that over time, they're going to drop in fantasy point production per wide receivers. It would drop if there's that increased specialization. So I've got 2 more lessons going to get into the age and experience and try to help the dynasty players here in the next couple of lessons, just for us to kind of get a feel for kind of the ultimate best age, best year of experience for wide receivers, and kind of see how that works for us here. So come back, finish the next 2 wide receiver metric lessons. This is Dr. Bush for The Process. We're having lots of fun. Woo woo.